This is Unrationed, episode 0. I'm Evan.
I'm Josh.
I'm Tony. You
Tony did
actually,
not know we were starting.
well, do you start with episode 0? You don't start with 1?
So this was a question I had actually as I was typing episode 0 in my notes, and it made me wonder whether there was a year 0. Do you guys know if there was a year 0? I looked it up. I've got the answer now, but I did not know.
I don't think there was.
There was no year 0.
Hmm.
It went from 1 BC to 1 AD.
So why'd you start with episode 1 or episode 0?
Because there's still a 0 century. So it made sense to me, but this can be episode 1.
Nope. I mean, it's episode 0 now, it seems like.
You committed us to it.
Oh, great. Okay. So this is the Unrationed podcast. Josh, Tony, which one of you came up with that name?
Well, I can't say that I came up with a name. It has to be attributed to Mike LeBecchi. There was a show or a series called Real Rock, or still is. And there's this dude, Mike LeBecchi, in like 2015, they did this segment on him called Rad Dad. And it was this dude that took his kid out and did like crazy adventures, like crazy mountaineering. And he had this saying called, "Why ration passion?" And so it always stuck with me, like, yeah, that's a great question. Why would we ration passion? So anyways, I like toyed with it over the next like 5 years and would share it a lot. And then it somehow evolved into Unration, and basically just trying to break down the barriers of why we withhold passion and all that good stuff. So Mike LeBecchi came up with it, and it's just merely a derivative of that.
Nice. I read this text from Tony last night that had a quote about Unration. I thought for sure that was the direction we were going. So Tony, what is this? Did you just write that thing last night?
Yeah, no, I just made that up.
Oh, well, that was incredible.
It was really good.
Okay, so Mike LeBecchi, am I saying that correctly?
You got it.
The first time I've ever said that word, and oftentimes the first time I say words, I question myself. So Mike LeBecchi. In these episodes, we'll start out with sharing some wild moments, kind of, I guess, inspired by this rad dad being out in the woods. We'll share a story of how the three of us came to know each other at some point. That would probably be a good thing to do in this first episode after we share our wild moments. But shall we dive into our wild moments from the week?
Good.
Tony.
We spent the last couple weeks back in St. Louis and came back up to our forest home here in Ontario over the weekend. And yesterday, I got out into the woods for a run for the first time in a couple weeks, out on these trails close to the house. And it was striking. It was my first time out there in, I want to say, 6 weeks. I haven't been going out to those trails through spring much. And just how dramatically things change. Like spring has sprung and the whole forest is just green and lush, and just a very different landscape from how it feels when it's 6 inches of snow and everything's ice. So, and I only saw one person for the 45 minutes I was running out there, which is always, nice. Yeah, that's always fun. Yeah. Josh, how about you?
So this is, actually Tony and Evan already got to hear this. So this past weekend I was in California at my grandparents' ranch, and they live in California. They have 200 acres. They have 25 acres of olive trees. And anyways, my kids came with me to go visit them and to help on the ranch. My gramps has to get a quadruple bypass surgery. So we're going out there, help him take care of a couple of things while he's out of commission for a little bit. So anyways, my 4-year-old son, Jack, who has super long curly hair and looks like a wild thing, we were in the orchard together, and he told me he had to go to the bathroom. And we were quite far away from the house, and he needed to go right then. So I let him take a poop right there in the orchard, and I cleaned him up with a rock, and that felt quite wild. We didn't stay that way. Once we got back to the house, there was an appropriate cleaning. However, in that moment, it felt quite wild and kind of enjoyable just to be there with my son in the orchard.
So
Fertilizing the ground.
are there no leaves? Are there no leaves in the orchard? Why wouldn't you have used leaves as wiping?
You don't want to use an olive tree leaf to wipe. It's like a fingernail, basically.
Pretty small.
There would be a messy situation had I used an olive tree leaf. Yeah. Don't do that. When you come out to the orchard at some point, please don't use olive tree leaves.
Noted.
So we didn't plan these moments, or we don't typically know what our wild moments are going to be each week whenever we gather together and kind of share these things, which this is something we've been doing before recording a podcast. That's probably also worth noting here at the beginning. I'm going to share 3 things that I learned from my wild moment and then my wild moment, because it seems like a better order for this particular one. And it was actually this morning. I woke up and went and did a run with a few guys, and let me share what I learned. One was, don't take yourself so seriously. The other was, humbly accept your humanity. And the other was, you have less control than you think you do. And I have, for better or worse, been drinking this Celsius drink like a little bit before my runs. It has some kind of caffeine and vitamins in it. Says it's good for you. I have no clue if it actually is or not, but I'm enjoying it. Has some sort of ritual before the run deal for me that I enjoy. Like mentally, I know I'm about to go on a run whenever I begin doing this, but it's got some caffeine in it. And caffeine in the morning really messes with me. Usually I'm at home with a coffee and I take a sip of coffee. I'm like, oh, I got to, go use the restroom. It's not a big deal. But this morning I was on my way to the run and I started drinking this. I was like, oh boy, this is not an ideal scenario. And so I show up and I got there early because I was actually going to do a mile before everybody else got there. I woke up a little earlier this morning, and I also don't have the key to the building that we go to. So I'm there early without a key, unable to run, stomach just in knots. And I kind of weighed my options and ended up, I don't know if I should share this on the podcast.
You should absolutely share this on the podcast.
It is actually very embarrassing, and I have thought about it several times. But one of the reason why I'm sharing this on the podcast is because the things that I've learned, like that don't take yourself so seriously. Everything that I learned says share this because it's embarrassing and something that I don't want to share. I ended up pooping in my truck bed. I had
Oh man, you did learn some things this morning.
I
have
had
so many questions
a
right
curtain.
now.
I had a curtain that was in the RV from when my wife and I did this RV trip around the country a few years back. And we used it as a moving blanket when we moved houses months ago. But I've got this truck bed cover, it just kind of stays in there and comes in handy for other uses. So I just kind of like laid out that curtain and took my shoes off just in case, and was in the parking lot, and it was 5:15 a.m.
Great.
And I did that and then got myself back together and went on a run. So don't take yourself so seriously. Humbly accept your humanity. You have less control than you think you do.
So we are in danger of becoming a pooping podcast, or like a poop-centric podcast, which is not what we were aiming for. That said, I mean, you didn't actually poop in the bed of the truck, right? You like had some sort of receptacle.
It was on the
That's a yes,
curtain.
no question. Just a yes,
Okay.
no.
Is the curtain considered a receptacle?
You're not cleaning your truck bed. You don't have to scrub your truck bed.
I don't have to
Correct.
scrub my truck bed.
All right.
All right. All we need to know. That's
It is
Thank
trash
you.
day too, which is nice.
So this artifact from your RV trip with your wife is no longer.
That's correct.
Sacrificed.
Everything has an end. Yes.
yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Gotcha. Did you wipe with olive leaves?
I did not. I mean, I don't know how much detail to go into here.
It might be time to move on.
Agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh gosh. Sure. Okay, so we're doing this thing. This is also like the kickstart of something we're doing called Wild 32. This is something we're creating for ourselves that at some point we're going to invite more people into. We're trying to do the thing, practice the thing, hone it in before inviting other people into the thing, which would be in this case Wild 32. Tony, could you kind of roll out what Wild 32 is, and maybe we can break down some of why we're doing this as we talk through what the thing is as well.
I was thinking about when it first came up, and it was a few weeks ago. And it seemed like it came up in the context of the hard 75. And I was just breaking down all the reasons hard 75 seems like a miserable thing to do to yourself. But we've been having these conversations now for a few months. I think this is like our 7th or 8th time doing this.
Yeah.
And just coming together around this idea of men helping other men try to become better men, and trying to find ways of supporting one another in showing up and doing that. And the three of us come at this question, I would say genuinely, and it's something we all spend time on. But we had this interesting thing where I had this idea for sort of a community of men who meet regularly to just noodle over and talk about and debate like what it means to live with integrity, right? And then Josh had his unrationed idea with retreats and sort of a more challenging approach to these questions. And then Evan, you've got praying in the woods and this idea you've been playing with about that.
Tony, you're cutting for you, Josh.
Nah, Tony's pretty good right now for me. You're cutting in and out though.
Uh-oh. All right. So we'll chop that out. We'll edit a little bit. And then Evan,
or we don't have to. There's no editing in the woods.
Just roll. You could just go. But yeah, that Evan, you've got praying in the woods, that let's say more contemplative sort of program of development. So bringing all these together into Wilds in the Woods, and what we've been playing around with there has led us via the hard 75 to a challenge called the Wild 32 or Wild 32. Is there a the in front of this? Is it just
Wild 32? And I think it might actually be called 75 hard. I'm sure the people who like actually do that will be like, oh, this guy has no idea what he's talking about.
I don't know.
Me neither. My wife attempted to do it, and that's where, I guess that's where we heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
It does sound like a miserable experience.
Yeah.
So what are the things that Wild 32 consists of? What are we doing for the next 32 days?
So we're working out 32 minutes a day. It's sitting quietly, meditating, if you will, 10 minutes a day, reading something substantive or nourishing 10 minutes a day. Pardon while the other one comes to me. Oh, spending 10 minutes outside. And then we've got a stipulation of nothing stronger than caffeine And then we've got daily check-ins that involve saying one thing I'm grateful for and one thing I'm feeling. Is that the list as y'all understand it?
Nailed it.
All right.
This works.
I do have a couple questions about what we've got on our list. Would now be a good time to toss out a question? So at some point, the idea, so like 75 Hard or whatever has their thing about no desserts for 75 days. And in the way we design this thing, then the desserts or sweets or whatever haven't made it in. I'd really like those to make it in. Can we? Yeah, like I just had 12 years since my last drink, but it's only been 12 hours since my last cookie, and I need help.
Yes, we will add. I think adding sweets in there is a good thing. It's a hard thing to measure though, which maybe don't go too much into detail in it, but like, so I've done some sort of eating plans where it requires tracking every gram of sugar. I don't think what we're talking about is as intense as that, but maybe just cutting out like a dessert or not eating the chocolate covered gummy bears that are on the counter, and more along those lines than limiting sugar intake. Is that accurate?
I think so. I mean, everything has sugar in it. So just no cookies and gummy bears.
Deal.
Are you going to be able to do that, Tony?
Well, that's, yes. I mean, I could do a no cookies, no gummy bears. And Evan, I think you're right that it's not about monitoring sugar intake. It's about, say, having a particular lens through which you're viewing what you're doing, right? So my intention would be to behave myself over 32 days and make progress on my relationship with sugar. And so the way I was, that's why it's like the no sweets. So that would cover snacks, that I might gravitate toward. It would also cover desserts. Am I the only one who has this particular? I mean, Josh, you're a mania.
No, I completely. Well, I was thinking about it where it's like you could say no sweets, and you say like no to a Snickers bar or like a piece of candy, and then you just have like 27 Cliff bars that have all kinds of sugar in them too. So I think you're right. Like it's the relationship with the snack, the treat, the whatever you find some type of satisfaction or substance injection.
What I like about this too, and the way you're framing it, is it's less about, oh gosh, how do I say this? It's less about the sugar and it's more about conscious presence and conscious behavior for 32 days. And it seems as though one could draw a parallel or correlate conscious behavior or conscious decision making with becoming a man of integrity. Is that, would it be fair to correlate those things and that give meaning to why these items exist that we're doing each day?
Absolutely. I mean, I think so. I think, the other aspect to it is like, if we're saying no to something, we're saying yes to something else. So I think, just like you put it, like in terms of conscious behavior, if I'm saying no, picking up some, mind numbing sweet or, a bottle of booze or something, I'm saying yes to some other type of path. And so I think you're spot on in terms of that, like conscious behavior.
Big piece of celery.
Yep.
Yes.
Just binge on celery for 32 days. Where did 32 come from, Tony?
That just came from my being a random person. That's.
I've known Tony for many, many years, and Tony has written me checks for like $11.72 because he thought it was funny. And it is quite funny when you get a check for $11.72. It's supposed to be like $11.
Yeah, back in in the days when people wrote checks.
Yeah.
Uh, um, I do have okay, so I think we're good on the sweets question, which is great. My other question, where have we come down on the reading? Are we coordinating? Are we treating this as we're all starting the same book at the same time? Where are we at on that?
Good question.
Yeah,
I think it would be more impactful if that were the case. It would at least we would have. Well, I say that each of us sharing something that we read each week from something different could be impactful as well. And we're playing around and distilling 3 different ideas in a manner that could be helpful. So I could convince myself of going either way, as long as the 3 things are intentional and have some sort of way of relating to what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a preference one way or the other?
I'm inclined to coordinate. I think it'd be a level of accountability that would help. I think a
We're
little
doing.
bit.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
We're doing 10 minutes, right? So we could end up on different pages based on our
Yeah.
varying speeds.
I'm not a very fast reader.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Do you have a book in mind? Or
Moby
Josh?
Dick.
Moby Dick.
I picked up Iron John again this morning, so I feel like it was an appropriate thing to reread during this time period.
Seems like a good place to start. Oh,
Yeah, and that answers my question of how, like today's day 1. So how would we coordinate getting the same book? That I think we all have that book. Is that accurate?
easily. There you go.
Solves that
Nice.
problem. Okay, so we will be going through Iron John, a book about men by Robert Bly.
It's pretty good. All worked out.
Huh?
So to do Wild 32, you have to purchase Iron John before you can start.
Yes, but don't let that stop you. If you are unable to purchase Iron John, let us know, and I'm sure we could put together some funds to buy Iron John for you.
But are you directing that at me? Was that a PSA?
No. That's like to the listener. I just don't
yes.
like the idea. This is why podcasts are so great, right? Is because information is free at this point. You have to have a device and a connection that allows you to gain access to the information, but that's accessible much easier than it has been for most of humanity. And I hate whenever money is a barrier to information flow. So that was more a note for the listener of like, if money is a barrier to accessing information, let us help solve that for you. And it's not a lot of money, like, whatever. But just, I don't like when that happens, when money is a barrier of information.
I like your
Seems like a
perspective.
real power move.
You can't start until you buy this.
Yes, which is a necessary. Anyways, I'm about to get on a tangent. I don't know if it's relevant, but it seems like necessary.
Yeah, go for it.
For there to be money traded, though. It's not like, oh, well, you should have the book for free. Somebody sacrificing and paying for it still seems like a good thing for everybody involved. The creator of the content, the publisher of the book, the person getting the information, and the person who is paying for that information for somebody else to get. Seems necessary. Would that be? This is what I'm saying. I think I'm going on a tangent. Tony's thinking really hard.
Well, I agree with that. And I was thinking, I have one other thing about design. And I know we want to talk some about how we're feeling about it on this first day of doing it and what our motivations are a little bit. But your point brought up something we had talked about a little bit over text of what about this idea of us being accountable as a group to some degree. that our intention being that over the course of 32 days, the three of us in this first iteration are going to stack up this number of minutes of these different things, right? And saying like, we're going to hit that total. And if somehow, one of us has fallen short, then somebody else can pick up the slack. But that our goal is to hit those totals as more like as a team. Where are we at on that idea?
I personally love it. I mean, I think there's some logistical things that are going to be really, really tough. Like if somebody slacks for like 3 days in a row, how do we know how we're going to pick up that slack at any point in time? But I think it makes a lot of sense in terms of, right, the mechanisms to help prevent that are the daily check-ins. And we should be aware of how people are doing every single day, at which point there shouldn't be too big of a duration. Like hopefully we can close the gap every single day. But I think it would be super, super powerful to know that somebody else is helping you out in whatever type of moment you're going through, or life happens and you can't get to the reading, you can't get to the workout. So I think it's a pretty special thing to see somebody pick up the slack when you're unable to.
Yeah, I do not stand in opposition to that either. Particularly the three of us have 2 children of varying ages under 4. Are all of them under 4? 4 and younger.
Yeah.
So we have 6 kids under the age of 4 between the 3 of us. One of the reasons I like this idea is because life will happen. And typically if I'm not going to be able to do my 32-minute workout in a day because something for a very real reason, then I'm texting you in the daily check-in saying I'm not doing my run. And it's also forcing me to talk about something going on in my life that's not allowing me to go on a run that day for a very real reason. And that seems like a good thing because I don't tend to share whatever that reason is with anybody other than just my wife, because she's in it with me and likely has the same reason. So as things come up, I tend to just go through them instead of allow other people to go through them with me. And that seems like it would be impactful.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm the same way in terms of like, I don't necessarily ask for a lot of help. And so, in those situations where you can't get the job done, it's going to be a humbling experience to say, hey, Tony, can you run an extra 32 minutes because I can't get to this today?
Are we, so I like where you're both coming from on this. Do we think that this tally gets settled every day in a way that like that each of us will have done the 32 minutes every day? As yeah, go ahead.
I think it gets settled the next day.
Yeah.
I think the check-in is where we find out what our day looks like. So like this morning we would do a check-in and I'd say, hey, I didn't do my 32-minute run yesterday and here's why. Between, I guess, the 3 of us, could I pick up some of my slack from yesterday today too? Between the 3 of us make up that 32 minutes.
Yeah. The way I think about it is maybe it's like you don't have any rollover minutes, right? What you've done is done. And if I did 50 minutes yesterday, that doesn't mean I can do 18 minutes less today, right?
Yeah.
Agree.
But if there's a deficit from yesterday, like if Evan says I only got out for 16 minutes, then maybe in that morning check-in, there could be a mechanism for say, all right, let's make up that ground. Does that make sense? Part of why I like that actually is I do think that will be motivating to not have to do that. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I really don't want to do that on any day of the next 32 days.
I think too, like I feel like there is, going back to the 75 hard stuff, there is like important design elements that we tried to incorporate in here that I feel like are worth talking about, where we don't want to have like the hard reset where it is kind of a barrier to progress, and that's what we want to strive for. So at the end of 32 days, we all talked about it, and that like our spouses should feel some type of difference. That would be the ideal situation. They say, hey, something's a little different about you. And so this shared mechanism of men helping other men be better men is super important. So I think some type of accountability or mechanism like this where we can pick up the slack is huge, but we also don't want to let down the other dudes who are doing it with us.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to note that there is, whether it's your spouse or a friend or your coworkers, we're doing this in a way to become men of integrity for the sake of the people around us that we have direct contact with in our lives. So in my circumstance, that would be my children and my wife and clients that I'm working with on a regular basis, like some sort of noticeable difference in the person that Evan is and is becoming. And if it gets in the way of that, this is something my wife and I have talked about, because like we've got a wedding coming up or a concert. She got tickets for me for my birthday back in January, and it's in this 32 days. She's like, well, you're not going to have a drink with me at the concert? Like, oh, well, that's a good question. If the purpose of this is serving something greater than just me as an individual, this is a question I have for you guys. What are your thoughts on? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm going to have a drink with you because I don't, this is about us together, not me doing something with Tony and Josh, which is what it feels like whenever I shift and say like, no, I'm not going to do that. Or I've got to get this workout in today. And she's like juggling both of the kids. And this is not meant to place a burden on the people around us. It's like, I've got to wake up earlier to go do this workout so that my workout doesn't become your burden. And I think that's really important. That is how at the end of this, my wife says, oh, I liked that you did that Wild 32. Because there is a scenario where I do Wild 32 and she was like, thank God that's over. And I hope at the end of it, she's not saying, thank God that's over. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Tony, do you want to go first?
No, go ahead if you're ready to roll.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Where my wife and I talked a lot about this because I do a couple other things on a weekly basis. Like one with my dad and my brothers, we meet every like Friday morning at 4:30 in the morning, Mountain Time, and it's a special time. We talk about things that we're all going to talk about in terms of being better dudes. But there's times where we did spiritual journeys that were very demanding, and I had to ask a lot of her during those time frames as well. And as much as she's willing and able to do that and wants to do that because she sees some effect on me, there is a burden. And so to ask her of that over and over again seems counterproductive. Like I'm not showing up for her. So in your situation, how are we waking up earlier? How are we prioritizing our days so that we can say yes to the people that we're doing this for in other ways? And in that situation, if you're having a moment with her, if you're celebrating something celebratory and with that person that you're doing it for seems to be an important distinction. However, you could go on a date every single night of the Wild 32 and be like, hey, we're celebrating each other. I'm going to have a drink with you. That would be also be counterproductive.
Yeah,
so
in a way,
full circle,
there would be a way that it's
presence.
Yes, intentional presence. And then in a way, I would learn something if it was like every night I'm celebrating something and having a drink, because I'm sharing that information with other people now. And that seems to be that still work in favor of this thing, making me a man of a better man, a man of integrity. So it's still the system doesn't break down necessarily. I just have a greater challenge ahead of me if that's the case. But yes. Okay, Tony, thoughts?
Ralph Waldo Emerson has a line about how a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of the small mind. So we come up with these things that we're going to attempt to do with a clear intention as to why we're doing it. But there are reasons not to adhere to the things all the time. So I think as we're thinking about projecting this out and for other men joining in what we're doing here, there are going to be a lot of different situations involved. And so it's interesting that the three of us are, like you said, Evan, we have wives and small kids. So the three of us are in this very rather specific set of circumstances where there is a lot of pressure on our households and our partners with the little ones in a way that I would hesitate to do something that's going to make my wife's life harder by virtue of what we're doing here. So yeah, I guess that would be the one where I'm okay with that exception. You won't have to go to wild jail for that.
Which brings us to wild jail.
Evan, do you want to cover wild jail? You're on.
Yes. No, we don't have a wild jail yet. That would be,
No.
yeah. Okay. I mean, I think we worked out some of our thoughts on this live and feeling good about it. Let's move to that. Josh, how do you feel about Wild 32?
I'm excited. Like having done like different longer term exercises, if you will, it is weird to see like what happens to your mind. Like I was doing this one where you couldn't get seconds. Like, so every meal you just, whatever was on your plate, you ate it and that was it. And all of a sudden, like 3 weeks into it, 4 weeks into it, you realize that your plate is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, like subconsciously. And you're just like, yeah, that's not a healthy habit. I'm just trying to like stuff myself on this first plate and like mound up food. So I'm like excited to see what those little things are that just like those mind tricks or those workarounds to the parameters we put in place, and share them with the group because they will happen.
Tony, how do you feel about Wild 32?
I was looking at my calendar last night and realized that day 32 is July 2nd, which is my first marathon. I've got a trail marathon up here in the Limberlost Reserve on that day, which is serendipitous. And I've had this idea in the back of my mind of getting in the best shape of my life by the time I hit 40, which is roughly 3 months from now. So, and I've still got some work to do on that front. Like, I'm in much better shape than I was 6 months ago, but that's been in the back of my mind. And I think this is going to help tremendously in terms of adding a level of discipline. And I've really appreciated the conversations we've been having and some of the seeds that are getting planted. I mean, one of them being Wild 32. You know, like when we first started talking about this idea was not something. So we've created this space with Wilds in the Woods, where we can play around and experiment in this idea, you know, in this general idea of what does healthy masculinity look like? What do we do in this culture where rites of passage pretty much no longer exist? You know, like how do we understand what it means to be a man today, in 2022, and try to become better versions of ourselves? And it seems like this can help. right? This could be like one tool in the toolbox for becoming a better version of myself. That's a characteristically meandering answer to that rather simple question.
The fact that your marathon is on July 2nd is pretty awesome. I didn't know that yet. That's exciting.
It is.
I'm glad that this leads up to it. I'm sure we'll be asking questions about your preparation. I'll be asking questions about your preparation for sure as you lead up to that. Cool. Okay. And then I'm feeling really good. I'm excited to read Iron John again, which I didn't know about until recording this, and kind of move through that content. There's something about being invited into something that's powerful. Invitations are powerful things. And in a way, I feel as though both of you have invited me to become a better man. And an invitation is different than being told to do something. Sometimes we're told to do things, and sometimes we're invited to do things, or sometimes we choose to do things on our own. And this really does feel like an invitation. It doesn't feel like something that I've chosen to do on my own or created on my own. And I'm excited to engage in this and say yes to something alongside you, and likely alongside a lot of other men over the next few years. You know, that this is the setting out on the adventure in a way, the first episode or the 0 episode.
Yeah.
And that feels significant. I think I said something along those lines in a text with the two of you. I don't remember what I was talking about. I think it was just Wilds in the Woods, or it doing the thing. We're doing something together in September, and it feels like saying yes to that invitation is like a moment in my life. So this feels like a moment in my life, not necessarily this podcast in particular, but the things that we're working on feel like a moment that I will look back on. So yeah, I'm excited about it. Let's wrap up with that quote about Hobnob. What did you say, Tony? That feels like a great end to this podcast today. Foolish.
A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of the small mind.
A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of the small mind.
Yeah. Well, and would you like me to read to you my explanation of how unration came to be?
Yes.
This is
so good.
This is helpful. I have to scroll through all our sweaty shirt pictures. So Evan had said it'd be good to have some context for the name Unrationed in the first episode. Sure. Well, I'd been marching through the Antarctic wasteland for 4 days. My crew was long since gone, as were the dogs, which we'd eaten almost immediately. I was down to my last watermelon and rationed the thing to last me a week. But then that night, staring into a sea of stars, the coldest wind you've ever imagined whipping against the sides of my tent, I thought, to hell with rations. If I'm going out unrationed. Stripped down to my socks, I ran from the tent, screaming at the sky, watermelon held above my head. Turned out a plane flying above saw my shadowy form on the snowy landscape and sent in an SOS. And here I am. It's just so beautiful.
Good. It really is.
That was like, that will likely lead into our next episode, because I think we're at the end of this one. But I thought about that a lot. Like, it's something to write really something good that people think about like that. I thought about that a lot this morning and how it applies to different areas of life. And I really thought this podcast was going in that direction. That's probably one of the reasons why I thought about it. But also, I'm like, that's good.
It's really good.
I appreciate that, gents. Yeah, that's the second episode. We could deconstruct Tony's text ramblings.
Yeah, and maybe develop that story more. I'm just kidding. I mean, that story might be a book.
I
We'll
could do
see.
it.
Anyways.
Yeah.
Okay. What if we just fade out with some music here and then
Okay.
somebody record an outro with like some. Oh, great. Well, now we don't need any post production. Do we do a check in today? Should we just do that real quick?
Yeah. Sure.
Do you guys have a couple minutes to do it?
Sure.
Okay. I'll jump in and then we can just run through. I'm grateful for the two of you in Wild 32. That really is the first thing that comes to my mind right now. This is an incredible thing, and I feel gratitude for this thing and for being on Zoom with you two and for the weird way we were connected just via LinkedIn and how that's
amazing.
been impactful in my life. I feel pretty embarrassed about the poop thing this morning. Like, it's really stuck with me. And yeah, the whole, like, the three things I learned are to humbly accept your humanity is like a tough one for me, I guess. I don't think I'm other than human, but it's like those limitations that come with being human. I hate that I wasn't able to control that today, like to the point where I had to go to my truck bed and poop. It's like it felt very childlike, like, to what you were talking about, Josh. It's like this is something that kids do, and it really that was hard. That's hard to accept.
You're hanging out with the right guy then.
Yeah,
I'll
I
make
was
you
gonna
feel
say-
a lot more
What
more
it's
adult.
worth, I've watched Josh's brother poop in the woods next to a school. Yeah, that's
Oh, good. That really
I shit
does
my
help.
pants so many times, and like
good.
yeah,
it's actually a thing about Arandas.
yeah. My brother says that like that sensor that's like tells you like, oh hey, I gotta go to the bathroom. He's like, it's right next to my asshole. He's like, so I only know I need to go to the bathroom when I'm shitting. Oh man, he's got a story. I love telling it. You have like 2 minutes for me to tell the story because it's. Oh, hold on. I gotta go get my son. It's
Okay.
amazing.
I'm looking forward to hearing it one of these days. Or are you gonna tell it whenever you get back? Okay.
He's good. Yeah.
Cool.
Should I check in while he's running away, or should
Yeah, I think he might have left one headphone in.
Say I'm grateful for just where I am in life up here, and feeling that over these last couple of days getting back from St. Louis. It's been so much change, but feeling gratitude for that. And then I'm feeling some stress around we're wanting to make progress in our household with our relationship with phones, and I'm feeling tension around just the thing about like my wife really encouraging me to make progress on this, and so like wanting to make progress while also not wanting to be nagged or like told that I need to make progress, that sort of thing. While at the same time not being satisfied myself with my relationship to the screens. So like wanting to make progress on it. So on my way out this morning, we were talking about what some parameters might look like for kind of a strategy for spending time away from the phone and spending time focused on presence and quality time with the kiddos and whatnot. So yeah, Feeling that a little bit. Josh, how about you?
The phone thing's very real. I'd like to follow your journey with that.
You will.
Great.
I'm putting the pieces in place so that it doesn't need to go in the bedroom. So from 10 to 5 a.m., it's not there. It's not what's waking me up. It's not what I'm reading right before I go to sleep. And then aiming for a couple chunks during the day when I'm away from it. And then also on the weekend, just aiming for 5 hours. I say stack up 5 hours in a weekend where the phone is out of sight. That's what we're aiming for here.
That was and has been one of the most impactful habits of the last 10 years of my life. Nailing my relationship with my phone, getting that to a place where it's I don't have to think about that anymore, because I those systems are just now kind of in place. And
I need to do what you've done.
I have no clue it's very inconvenient, but it's not inconvenient for me anymore because I've been doing it for 7 years. But it is if I want to communicate via anything other than text or phone call, I need my computer. Or if I want to Google something, I need my computer. Or if I want to do Evernote or whatever, I've built in an inefficiency that I just have learned to know no other way. And it is very inefficient, but it is the most impactful thing that I've done.
I can't do it, man.
Yeah. You could also just do the light. What I was inspired by was the light phone, but I was at that point, I didn't want to spend $100, $150, whatever it is, on another device, only to find out I wasn't going to use it a month in. So it's well, let me just turn my iPhone into a light phone, and it's been that way since 2015.
I look forward to my own evolution in your direction.
Yes. Yeah. I say all of that not to say do this, but just to say getting that figured out is impactful in whatever way it's figured out.
Right on.
I am going to need to hop off, I think. I've got to.
Let's just run away and then not talk to him again.
We'll do Josh's checking over text.
Right on.